Hello viewers, welcome to QTP functional testing videos. Myself Uday. In this video, I would like to demonstrate to you about how smart identification is used in QTP. So for this demonstration purpose, I have a sample application where user has to enter some username, whatever it is. You can enter whatever the name you want. You can enter whatever the password you want. Just click on this login button, right? So whatever the username that you entered here got displayed here. The sample code for this web app is this, okay, where we have two text boxes and three buttons, and each button have different types. For the first button it is of type button, and for the second button it is of type reset, and the third button is of type submit, right? So once I click on this login button, I will invoke a method called printme function, which what it will do is it will set the whatever the name that you entered here will be set in that label. Okay, so what I will do here is I will record this session. Okay, so I would like to cover 2 points here, right? I would like in the first point I will do uh, like record and run the session without setting the smart identification, and in the second example I will demonstrate you the same thing using smart identification process. So for this moment, uh, what I have is I didn't set the like smart identification for this web object. You can see the checkbox is not set here. Okay, so uh, I will explain you like why that was not set. Okay, just record it, enter the username, Dhanam, Dhanam, just click on login button. Okay, just stop it. Okay, say now the object got changed from login to sign in, right? So when I execute my script now, will it be able to succeed? Let's see. So when I run my script, what will happen is it entered username and password, and it is trying to look for the login button, but it got changed to sign in button. So it will try to find out that login button. Because login button never exists, it will fail, right? But for example, at this moment we didn't set the smart identification process for web button, right? Let's see whether we can able to identify the object if the smart identification is set. Okay, I set the smart identification for web button. Okay, so what I have to do now is I will bring back the application to scratch. So I will bring to the original condition. So what I'm trying to say here is change it to login button. Okay, record the session, the username, the name, password, anything you want. Just click on login. So whatever the username entered is displayed here. Stop it. Say the object got changed to sign in button now. Okay, let's see at this moment now is whether QTP able to identify the object, because earlier it was a login name, now it got changed to sign in, and now the smart identification is enabled for buttons, right? Let's run the script. it entered username, password, and looking out for login button. And now the smart identification is process is going on, and see whether we can able to find that object or not. See, even though the login button got changed to sign in button, it able to identify this object and clicked on sign in button, right? So let's see how it got find out that login button. So whenever the smart identification process is used, it will be displayed with this exclamation mark. Okay, so for this edit button, because it didn't apply any smart identification and the object remains same, then these two values are executed normally. But whereas for this login button, it got changed to sign in button, right, where it applies the smart identification, because smart identification is enabled for the button class, right? This is the overall process, the overall smart identification process it used to identify the object, right? So let me explain you about something about what is the smart identification, how exactly it identifies that object. So whenever QTP unable to find an object in an application because the object got changed or the objects are not unique, then the script will fails if the smart identification is not enabled, right? If we configure the smart identification for that object class, then there are chances that QTP can able to identify the object. So what I am trying to cover here is, it doesn't mean that 100% it can able to identify the object. If we properly configure the smart identification and the algorithm, it has some process, right? The process will be applied to identify that object, and if it succeeds, then it will able to identify the object. Smart identification process is little bit complex, but it is flexible. Okay, and as with like our object identification process, even in the smart identification also we have two types of properties called base filter properties, and another one is optional filter properties. So what is base filter properties? These are the fundamental properties of any object class. For example, if you take any link has an HTML tag of a, whereas HTML tag for the edit box is input, right? So these are the preliminary fundamental properties for any object class. Okay, what are optional filter properties? These properties are the regular properties. Like what are the rest of the properties belongs to the optional filter properties. So this is the smart identification process, which which is which it uses to identify the object. So what it will do here is, whatever the identification, see, once we can see this, like even I think that is there in my presentation as well. Okay, so this is the original description about that object. Even I can show you in this. So if you go to this is the original description about that object. Okay, so what it do is, uh, so it will ignore the whatever the test object description that already have. Okay, so this is the original object description, it forgets about that. Then it uses an algorithm, thus whatever the smart identification algorithm it have, it uses that algorithm to find the object, right? So what it will do is, it will, at the first step, it will create an object candidate list. Object candidate list is nothing but the collection of objects. Okay, the first step what it will do is, see, for this login button, what is the parent object? Page, right? So it will first prepare a candidate list with the all the objects that are existing in this page. So what are the different objects that is existing in my application? There are two edit boxes and three buttons, right? So the candidate list will contains all these five objects. Okay, once the first step is applied, what it will do is it will filter this candidate list. Okay, what is the first filter? Which will have filters with the class name and whatever the filter that is set in the base filter properties, right? So what is the base filter for the web object? Go and see in web object, it will be HTML ID, right? Even all these objects are having HTML type as, okay. So okay, this is text, and these are the two button types, right? So now what it will do is it will check the HTML tag, right? HTML tag of input. And what is the class for this object? This is a web button. Among these five objects, it filters with the button objects and HTML tag as input, right? So once it applies this filter, it will sort out with the new candidate list with these three objects, right? That is the, what is the filter criteria? Base filter criteria here is the class type should be button and HTML tag is input. So now whatever we have the five objects with all these, the once the initial filter is applied, it sort out with a three objects. Okay, what are the three objects? Of type button and HTML tag as input. So in our new candidate list will consist of these three objects. So among these three objects we need to find out one object, right? So I need to click on one object. Even if the candidate list is two objects, I don't know in which of these two objects I need to click, right? So it needs to furtherly shorten that object candidate list. So as a second step, what it will do is it will use the properties like uh, individual properties from the optional filter properties. So what it will do here now is it will apply the filter with these properties now one by one. Okay, it will apply the name property. So see, these are the optional filter properties that is configured for the web, right? So what is the name property? So for this name, it is looking at the, so now it is trying to find an object with the name login, right? But what are the name properties for these three objects now? Because login got changed to sign in and it is with the name sign in now, and reset button have the name reset, and cancel button have a name called cancel. But what it is looking, it is looking with a name called login button, right? Because it is not able to find any match here, what it will do is it skips this property. Okay, so that is exactly what is there in optional filter, because it is looking an object with name login and none of these objects is having with the name login, it skips this property. Okay, that is exactly what is there in this elimination process. If the object candidate list contains with exactly one matches, then it uses that property and ignores the rest of the optional filter properties and exit that process. Okay, so for example, after applying that property from the optional filter properties, if the object candidate list is empty, so there are chances that, for example, when I apply that property, right, optional filter property, the candidate list becomes empty. Then what it will do is it will ignore that property, because I am trying to find an at least one object which matches that description. But here what happened? The object candidate list becomes empty, so I need not to bother about that property, right? So and another point here is, if the another chance is that if the object candidate list is having more than one object. Okay, for example, I applied one property. Okay, but what it does is it has shortened my object candidate list with that property. So what I will do is I will use that property, because my object candidate list is shortened with that property. Okay, so it uses this elimination process repeatedly for a new candidate list, right? So if you go to our example, now initially it applied with a property called name in, which doesn't match with any of the description, so it skipped, right? Now what on the next property is having of type button. Okay, so what is the type for this login button? It is of type button. Okay, as you can see in this, so the type is for the first button is button, the type for the second button is reset, and the type for the third button is submit, right? So this is a type button, and for this reset, and this is submit. Whereas when I am recording, the type is button, so I will find this property which matches among these three different objects. So which one is match? Sign in button, right? So I, because at this moment I have only single property with this button, I will use this property and will exit the smart identification, because I found out the object which I want, right? And it ignores the rest of the properties. That is how it finds that sign in button now. Okay, that is the elimination process, right? So to summarize further here, what I am doing, I will repeat the same, I will explain you the same process once again. So whatever the object description it learned during the recording session, it will ignores the description. Okay, then it filters, it will prepare a object candidate list with the object's parent. So what I am trying to say here is, because this web button, what is the parent for this web button? Page. It will prepare a candidate list with the all the controls there in page. So at this moment I have all these 5 objects. Okay, and once the base filter is applied, so it, because this is of type button, it applies filter with this class, okay, and HTML tag. So among these 5 controls, how many web buttons are there? These are the 3 buttons. So always my intent here is to reduce the object candidate list and need to make a single object so that I can perform the operation, right? So now my new candidate list is with these 3 buttons. Okay, now what I will do is I'll do apply, I will use individual optional filter properties and will try to shorten that candidate list, right? So when I apply this optional filter, 3 things may happen. Okay, when I apply this optional filter, if I found out an object candidate list with a single object, right? Then I will uses that object and will smart identification process will exit. Okay, these are the three different combinations that may happen. If I found out the exact single object, then the smart identification process exits. If even after applying that properties, if the candidate list got empty, then because I need at least one object, but here the candidate list got empty, so I don't, there is no use of using that property, right? There is another chance that at least, like it among the candidate list it has sorted with a fewer of that candidate list. For example, what it has done is, even after applying three buttons, right, if it got able to reduce to two objects at least, then I will use that object also for my smart identification process, and I will use the same mechanism for the new object candidate list. Okay, excuse me. So that is how it eliminates the objects and tries to derive a unique object. Okay, so what will happen after completing the smart identification elimination process also, if QTP cannot identify the object, then QTP uses the learner description plus ordinal identifier. Okay, so at this moment what happened is, because the smart identification is enabled for this web button and it was successfully able to identify the object with smart identification, then it is fine. But assume there are chances that even after applying the smart identification also, if it not able to identify the object, what it will do is, it will uses the learner description, whatever this original description is there, right? With this original description it will try to add the ordinal identifier and try to find the object. If the learner description with the ordinal identifier is also not sufficient to identify the object, then QTP throws the error message. Okay, that is how the smart identification works. Okay, thanks for watching this video. Please leave your comments. Thank you.